Story 1. I met Daniel at work a little over 2 years earlier. He had a way of bending time. 10-hour shifts collapsed into something light and forgettable when he was around. He was tall, effortlessly charming, with a smile that could sand down even the roughest day. We stayed hidden. The company's no-dating rule made secrecy necessary, and then there was the woman in his life, the longtime girlfriend he described as practically a stranger. "We're just sharing a roof," he'd say. I believed him. Or maybe belief was easier than admitting I was being lied to. As Christmas crept closer, the silence started to suffocate me. One night after closing, standing beneath the flickering fluorescent lights in the storage room, I finally said it out loud. "Choose me. Or end this." He didn't hesitate. He looked straight at me, too steady, too calm, and nodded. "I will," he said. "Let's go away on Christmas Eve. Just us. A hotel outside Ravensire. No one else. I want you to know I'm serious." Those words lodged in my chest like a vow. I held onto them tightly. I packed light, winter clothes, toiletries, my charger, a small wrapped gift for him. We left Northbridge just before noon, holiday traffic choking the roads. Daniel drove. Instead of the familiar motorway, he veered onto narrow northern roads I didn't recognize. "Shortcut," he said. "Trust me. It'll be better." But something was wrong. His hands were locked around the steering wheel, knuckles pale. Every few minutes, he checked the rearview mirror, his jaw tightening. "You okay?" I asked. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah. Just excited." We talked about work, about the new year, about finally not hiding. "Imagine not sneaking around anymore," I said. He waited too long before answering. "Soon," he replied. "Oh, my brother Lucas might stop by for a quick drink. He lives nearby. Wants to meet you properly." My stomach sank. I thought this was just us. "It is," he said quickly. "He won't stay long." I let it go. I shouldn't have. I let the cheerful carols on the radio drown out the dread pooling quietly in my chest. About an hour later, his phone buzzed. He glanced down, typed fast. I saw 2 words before he shoved the phone away. "Phase ready." "Work," he said when he noticed me staring. "Since when does our job have phases?" He didn't answer. We reached Lucas's house as daylight bled into that dead, gray-blue winter dusk. A plain semi-detached place on a silent street in a Blackmore suburb. Lucas opened the door immediately, like he'd been waiting with his hand on the handle. He was taller than Daniel, stiff-backed, eyes cold and measuring. His handshake lingered just long enough to feel wrong. "Nice to finally meet you, Clara," he said flatly. "Come in. I've made tea." The house smelled off. Sharp. Chemical. The living room was cramped, dim, wallpaper peeling like old skin. Daniel told me to sit. "Check-in isn't until later," he said. "We'll relax here first." Lucas handed me the tea. One sip and my tongue recoiled, bitter, metallic. "Herbal," he said, watching me drink. "Calms the nerves." They asked questions. Too many. About my family. My routines. Where I lived. And between answers, they shared glances, quick, silent signals that made my pulse stutter. The room grew unbearably warm. My thoughts started to smear at the edges. "I need the bathroom," I said, forcing myself upright. In the hallway, I heard them whisper. "Now," Lucas murmured. "Wait for it," Daniel replied. My blood turned to ice. I locked the bathroom door and shook as I texted my sister. "At Daniel's brother's place in Blackmore. Something's wrong. Call the police if I don't respond in an hour." I flushed the toilet for cover, splashed cold water on my face, hugged myself once, then stepped back out. They were standing now. Lucas near the door. Daniel closer to me. Their faces were stripped of warmth, like masks removed. "Everything okay?" Daniel asked. "I think we should leave," I said. "Now." Lucas moved, blocking the exit. "Stay," he said. "There's something we need to show you." Daniel stepped closer. His voice dropped, flat and empty. "I can't let this continue." "What are you talking about?" My voice barely existed. Lucas reached into his pocket and pulled out a damp cloth. It glistened under the light. The smell hit me instantly, sharp, burning, unmistakable. "Chloroform." Daniel grabbed my arm. "You pushed too hard," he whispered. "You were going to ruin everything." His girlfriend. The one who never left. The truth landed like a blow. Lucas lunged. I ducked, grabbed a lamp, and swung. It shattered against his arm, the cloth skidding across the floor. I screamed. Daniel seized me from behind, forcing my head back. We crashed into a chair. Lucas snatched the cloth again, his face twisted with rage. My limbs felt heavy, the tea sinking deeper, dragging me under. I kicked wildly, catching Lucas's knee. He swore and stumbled. My phone buzzed. My sister calling. I couldn't reach it. The cloth closed in. I slammed my head back into Daniel's face. Something broke. He screamed and released me. I ran. I tore open the front door and stumbled into the freezing night, screaming until my throat burned. Lights flicked all along the street. A car slowed. I threw myself in front of it. The driver, an older man, stopped instantly. "Please," I gasped, collapsing into his seat. "Call the police." He did. By the time the sirens came, Daniel and Lucas were gone, melting back into the house like ghosts. What the police found still haunts me. Chloroform. Vials of arsenic and mercury. Notes. Search histories. Weeks of planning. Lucas's garden plot nearby had fresh soil and tools already laid out. My tea tested positive for sedatives. They were arrested that night. Both sentenced to life. I survived because of a locked bathroom, a 10-second text, and blind instinct. But survival doesn't erase fear. Every holiday. Every detour. Every promise dressed up as love, I feel it behind me. Watching. A reminder, trust doesn't crack slowly. It vanishes in an instant. And sometimes, the people who say they love you are only waiting for the moment you stop struggling. Story 2. It was a few days before Christmas in 1987, one of those brittle winter mornings where the sky looks bleached and exhausted, like it gave up trying to be blue. The cold had teeth. I'd left before dawn, thinking I'd surprise my aunt and uncle by helping decorate their small farmhouse out near Redfield Hollow. The highways were nearly empty, just my aging sedan, the low hum of the engine, and the radio crackling between warped Christmas carols and static. The trunk was packed with wrapped presents, and my thoughts were already filled with pine needles, coffee, and the smell of baking spices. I expected to arrive by noon. I didn't know that drive would follow me for the rest of my life. About an hour in, heading west along a lonely stretch of Route 9, I caught up to a beige Plymouth crawling along well below the speed limit. At first, I assumed it was an elderly driver. Cars like that usually were. But as I drew closer, the picture sharpened in ways I didn't like. Two men sat in the front, broad-shouldered, rigid, both in dark coats. In the back seat were an elderly couple who looked painfully out of place. The woman was small, white hair pinned neatly, hands clenched in her lap. The man beside her wore a wool cap pulled low, his shoulders hunched inward like he was trying to disappear. They didn't look like people on a holiday trip. They looked like cargo. As I slowed behind them, the woman turned her head just slightly. Our eyes met through the rear window. Her face was drained of color, lips trembling. She mouthed something, slow, deliberate words I couldn't hear. Then the older man beside her reached out, touching her arm as if to quiet her. At the same moment, the driver glanced up at his mirror. I snapped my eyes away, pretending to fiddle with the radio, heart stuttering. "Why are you driving so slow?" I muttered, trying to talk myself down. Maybe I was projecting. Maybe it was nothing. But a hard, icy knot settled in my stomach. Less than a mile later, the Plymouth made a sudden turn onto a narrow side road, swallowed almost immediately by dense pine forest. Gravel sprayed. Without giving myself time to think, I followed. I told myself I was just checking. If they were lost, if something was wrong, I could help. But the truth was heavier. I followed because every instinct I had was screaming. The gravel road wound inward, the trees pressing close, blocking out what little daylight remained. The forest felt wrong, too quiet, as if sound itself didn't want to linger. Ahead, the Plymouth slowed and stopped near a small clearing crusted with frost. I braked far back, killed my engine, and watched through trembling hands. The two men exited first. One was tall, stringy, with an unkempt beard and sharp, impatient movements. The other was shorter but thick, dense with muscle, like he'd been poured into his jacket. They ripped open the back doors and dragged the elderly couple out. The old man stumbled, nearly falling. The woman grabbed him, shaking. "Please," the man said, voice thin and cracking. "We did what you asked. We gave you the money. Just let us go. We won't say anything." My blood went cold. The taller man laughed, a low, humorless sound that made my scalp prickle. "You think we're stupid?" That withdrawal wasn't all of it. The shorter man shoved the woman toward the trees. "Come on. Tell us where the rest is, or this gets ugly." This wasn't confusion. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This was planned. I slipped out of my car and followed at a distance, crouched low. Every snapping twig sounded deafening. Their voices echoed through the woods as they forced the couple deeper inside. They stopped in a small clearing dusted with ice. The tall man pulled a handgun from his coat. It looked too small, too simple, to be that final. "Last chance," he said. "Where's the safe? We saw the Christmas cards. People like you always hide cash." The old man, Harold, I'd later learn, straightened as much as his shaking legs allowed. "There is no safe," he said. "That was everything. Please. It's Christmas. Our family's waiting." The woman, Eleanor, began to sob quietly. 8,000. That's all we have. We told you." The gun lifted. I pressed myself behind a tree, breath trapped in my chest. 1. Harold closed his eyes, whispering something I couldn't hear. 2. "No, please," Eleanor begged. 3. The shot ripped through the forest, sharp and absolute. Harold collapsed into the frost like his bones had vanished. Eleanor screamed. A thin, tearing sound that cut straight through me. "Shut up," the shorter man snarled, turning the gun on her. She staggered back, hands raised. "Why?" she sobbed. "Why are you doing this?" "Because we can." Another shot. Another body hitting the frozen ground. I bit my lip hard enough to taste blood, forcing myself not to make a sound. The men rifled through the bodies, muttering to each other. "Take the wallets," the tall one said. "Mess it up." "What about the car?" "Leave it. Nobody comes out here." Then they turned back toward the road. Toward me. Panic flared white hot. I tried to move quietly, but a branch snapped under my boot. Both men froze. "You hear that?" the tall one said. "Check it out." Footsteps crunched closer. I ran. Branches clawed my face. Thorns tore my coat. I could hear them shouting, angry, startled, gaining. My lungs burned. My legs felt like rubber. I burst out of the trees and sprinted for my car. My keys shook so badly they slipped from my hand, clattering onto the gravel. I grabbed them, jammed one into the ignition, and the engine roared to life just as dark shapes broke through the tree line. I tore down the road, gravel flying, heart slamming so hard my vision blurred. In the mirror, I saw them standing at the edge of the trees, watching. I didn't look back again. At the sheriff's office in Miller's Crossing, I stumbled through the door, shaking. I saw murder. I managed. 2 men. Route 9. An old couple. As I spoke, the deputies' doubt drained away. By nightfall, they found everything, the car, the clearing, the bodies, exactly where I said. Harold and Eleanor Klein, well known in nearby Briarwood, had been abducted, forced to empty their savings, then executed in the woods. Everyone whispered the same names, Caleb and Mason Rowe, local brothers with a history of violence. No one would testify. People who crossed them tended to vanish. The case went cold. I moved. Changed numbers. Avoided back roads. Then, in 2013, Mason died. People talked. Caleb was arrested, convicted, and buried behind bars. Justice came late. The ghosts never left. Even now, I avoid empty highways during the holidays. And sometimes, when the air is cold enough and the trees press in close enough, I still hear Eleanor's scream echoing through the woods. If you're traveling this season, stay where there are lights. Stay where there are people. The quiet places are never empty. Story 3. I boarded the flight out of Brussels on Christmas morning with my thoughts already across the Atlantic, imagining my family gathered in Cleveland, the house glowing with lights and noise and warmth. I'd been away most of the year, and the idea of stepping back into something familiar felt like oxygen. The plane was full of holiday travelers, parents wrestling carry-ons and exhausted kids, couples leaning together under shared headphones, solo passengers cocooned in blankets. The cabin had that soft, worn-out holiday calm, like everyone had agreed to be gentle with one another for a few hours. I slid into my window seat and was settling in when I noticed him. A young man sat several rows ahead of me, near the aisle. There was nothing remarkable about his clothes or face. What caught my attention was how utterly still he was. No phone. No book. No headphones. He didn't fidget or glance around like everyone else. He just sat upright, staring forward, unblinking, as if waiting for a signal only he could hear. I told myself he was a nervous flyer and opened a magazine. The flight passed smoothly at first. Meal trays clattered. The engines droned. Conversation ebbed and flowed. The woman beside me, Marjorie, an older lady with soft gray curls and a comforting smile, told me about visiting her son in France and how her grandchildren were probably tearing through wrapping paper without her. I told her how much I missed my father's terrible Christmas jokes. At 30,000 feet, wrapped in that steady hum, it felt safe. Almost lulling. Then, about 20 minutes before landing, the still man stood and walked toward the restroom. At first, no one cared. But minutes passed. Then more. People began glancing up. When he finally came back, he didn't sit normally. He pulled a blanket completely over himself, head, shoulders, everything, like a child hiding from a nightmare. The cabin wasn't cold. Marjorie leaned toward me. "He doesn't look well," she whispered. "Maybe sick." "Maybe," I said, though something tight crept up my spine. Under the blanket, his hands moved. Fast. Repetitive. Purposeful. I looked away. Then came a sharp pop. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the cabin like a snapped wire. A few people laughed nervously. Someone muttered about static electricity. Then another pop. And then the smell reached us. Acrid. Bitter. Burning plastic and something sharper underneath. "Do you smell that?" I whispered. Marjorie's face tightened. "That's not food." I scanned the aisle and saw thin, gray tendrils of smoke curling from beneath the blanket. A flight attendant hurried over. "Sir," she said, calm but strained. "Are you all right?" No response. Another pop, louder, and suddenly a flash of orange flared beneath the blanket. Flames licked upward, hungry and fast. Someone screamed. Fire, a woman shouted. The cabin erupted. People surged up from their seats. Smoke climbed toward the ceiling. The man didn't scream. He didn't flail. He sat there, eerily composed, as flames crawled up his legs and kissed the side of the aircraft. It sounded wrong, the fire crackled as if it were chewing. He's got something, someone yelled. A flight attendant blasted a fire extinguisher, white foam exploding across the aisle. The flames sputtered, hissed, but refused to die right away. Marjorie gripped my arm so hard it hurt. Are we going to die? She whispered. I didn't answer. All I could think was fire on a plane means nowhere to run. Then a tall passenger, a bald man with a thick accent, vaulted over the seats like he didn't know fear existed. Hold him down, someone shouted. Under the blanket, the man shifted, reaching toward his pocket. His face was exposed now, blank, detached, almost peaceful, as if he weren't burning at all. The bald man tackled him, tearing the blanket away. What was underneath made my stomach drop. His pants were scorched through, fabric smoldering. Strapped to his underwear was a warped, half-melted device, powdery, smoking, wrong. Like something unfinished and dangerous, clinging to him like a parasite. It's a bomb, the man yelled. I moved without thinking, grabbing the suspect's legs as others piled on. Heat radiated from his body. The air burned my lungs. Every second felt like borrowed time. People screamed. Someone prayed out loud. A child sobbed uncontrollably behind us. We're going to crash, the child cried. Plastic restraints were shoved down the aisle. We bound the man as he murmured quietly in a language none of us understood, eyes locked on the ruined device like he was mourning it. Then he spoke English. Flat. Calm. Explosive device. My heart seemed to stop. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, controlled, but fraying at the edges. Ladies and gentlemen, we are declaring an emergency. Remain seated. We will be landing immediately. We dragged the man forward, stamping out the last glowing embers on his clothes. His skin was blistered, raw, but he barely reacted. The bald man's hands were burned, his sleeves singed, but he refused medical help, staying close as if daring the suspect to try again. Time stretched, elastic and unbearable. I stared out the window as the ground rushed up, convinced the plane would tear apart before we touched down. The landing slammed hard enough to knock the breath from my chest. Sirens screamed outside. Fire engines and police vehicles surrounded us within seconds. Armed officers stormed the cabin and hauled the man away. The rest of us sat frozen, shaking, the adrenaline draining into exhaustion and tears. That night, instead of sitting beneath my parents' tree, sipping something warm, I lay awake in a Cleveland hotel room, replaying it all, the pops, the smoke, the fire, that man's empty eyes. I still fly. But every time the cabin lights dim, every time someone sits too still for too long, I'm back there. On the Christmas flight that nearly became a falling furnace in the sky. And how close we all came to never landing at all.